In the quiet world beneath our feet, worms seem harmless. But in the ocean, something changes. Why do these simple creatures turn into ambush hunters, giants, and toxic nightmares the moment they enter the water? Why does the sea push them toward violence while land keeps them meek? And what force in the deep is so fierce that worms must evolve jaws, armor, and frightening tricks just to survive? To understand this strange divide, we have to begin with the creature that shows the transformation most clearly. Keep watching. This is a worm. And this is also a worm. One lives on land, drying out on sidewalks and waiting for birds to pluck it away. The other lives in the ocean, where worms become predators. They bite, they hunt, and some grow more than 10 feet long. Even though they are all true worms, their worlds force them into completely different roles. The clearest example is the bobbit worm, Eunice aphroditwa, a creature built like a living bear trap hidden in the sand. It can grow up to 10 feet long, though almost all of it stays buried. Only 5 antennae rise above the surface, acting as motion sensors. When something nudges them, the strike is instantaneous. A pufferfish swims too close, and in a blur, it is dragged downward into darkness. Bobbit worms barely know what they are grabbing. They have no real eyes, just light-sensitive spots. They attack anything that moves near their burrow, then try to pull the prey underground for a private feast. Large prey may escape, but the worm often tears off a piece instead. Sometimes, though, even a thick pufferfish disappears entirely into the sand. Can puffers poison the worm? Potentially. But if the fish cannot inflate in time, or if the worm only bites non-lethal parts, the toxins may not flow fast enough to matter. These worms can take a painful chunk out of a human finger, though they are not strong enough to sever one. Luckily, we are far too big to be dragged underground, but a bite leaves a sharp, lasting sting. What makes them far more unsettling is how well they hide. Aquarists have discovered giant bobbit worms that slipped into home tanks inside pieces of live rock. For months or even years, fish vanished mysteriously until the owner finally spotted a huge worm retreating into the gravel. Why did these worms evolve into monsters while earthworms stayed soft and harmless? On land, worms are decomposers, feeding on decaying leaves in a world with abundant organic matter and little need for defense. Their survival strategy is simple. There are so many of them that predators can never wipe them out. But the coral reef is different. It is fierce, crowded, filled with armor claws and competition. Dead organic matter holds almost no nutrients, yet a single fish is worth millions of times more than a mouthful of soil. To take prey that fights back, worms must grow larger, build real jaws, and abandon the quiet lifestyle of their land-dwelling cousins. The greatest reason ocean worms can grow so large comes down to simple physics: gravity. On land, an earthworm stretching to 10 feet would collapse under its own weight. Its soft body would become a heavy, motionless strand lying on the ground, unable to move or strike. The earth would not support a creature built like that. But water changes everything. Buoyancy lifts the body, removing the crushing burden that gravity imposes on land. Suddenly, a worm can grow thicker muscles, heavier jaws, and a longer frame without collapsing. The ocean frees them from size limits, letting evolution push them into strange, monstrous forms. And the surprises do not stop there. Some ocean worms take advantage of their environment in a completely different way. Instead of growing huge and powerful, they become bizarrely stealthy enemies hiding in plain sight. A creature might vanish from an aquarium overnight, and the owner will have no idea why. Days later, a flash of motion in the gravel reveals the truth. The bobbit worm is only the beginning. The ocean does not just allow worms to grow, it transforms them. Not every ocean worm becomes a giant ambush predator. Some choose a different path, one built on danger rather than strength. Enter the bearded fireworm. At first glance, it almost looks friendly. Bright colors, soft-looking tufts running along its sides, a body that resembles a harmless underwater pipe cleaner. You might even feel the urge to touch it. Do not touch it. Those fluffy white bristles are thousands of glass-like needles called chaeta, each loaded with potent neurotoxin. Even the slightest brush snaps these needles into your skin, delivering venom straight to your nerves. The pain is immediate and intense, described as if your hand has caught fire. Nausea and dizziness can linger for days. This is a survival strategy land worms never needed. On the reef, where everything eats everything, fireworms advertise their danger through warning colors. They do not hide like bobbit worms. They want predators to see them and think twice. Oddly, fireworms resemble earthworms in one way. They are slow, soft, and easy to catch, but the fire inside them is the only reason they still exist in such a brutal habitat. Without their toxins, they would have vanished long ago. Yet even these fiery defenses pale compared to what comes next. The bobbit worm may look terrifying beside a fireworm, but it is tiny compared to the ocean's true champion of length. This is the ribbon worm, the longest animal on the planet. Longer than any dinosaur. Longer than a blue whale. A single bootlace worm once measured an estimated 180 feet, half the length of a football field made entirely of worm. Yet despite its record-breaking size, it is fragile and gooey, nothing like the solid muscle of snakes. So how does a creature so delicate manage to hunt? It uses a proboscis, a muscular organ tucked inside its body. When it attacks, it fires this structure outward, turning itself inside out to cast a sticky web-like net around its prey. It resembles a living root system exploding from its face, acidic enough to mildly irritate human skin but rarely harmful. Ribbon worms frightened by sheer length, not power. Why evolve to be so long surface area? Ribbon worms do not have lungs or gills. They breathe through their skin, absorbing oxygen directly from the water. By becoming long and impossibly thin, they maximize the amount of exposed surface. Their bodies function like enormous living lungs stretched across the sea floor. And length offers another advantage. A ribbon worm hardly needs to travel to hunt. It can remain safely hidden in a crevice while the rest of its body sprawls across the ocean floor like a tripwire. A passing animal only needs to touch one section for the strike to begin. You might think such length would make them easy targets, and it would if not for the foul mucus coating their entire body. They taste like decay, worse than what we imagine worms already taste like. Few predators want a second bite. Despite their worm-like name, ribbon worms are not true annelids, but convergent evolution shaped them into something that fills a similar niche. They gain length cheaply without gaining weight. Some stretch farther and farther because nothing in their environment stops them. The same freedom from gravity that lets bobbit worms grow thick allows ribbon worms to grow endlessly long. If long acidic ribbon worms seem strange, the ocean has an even more impossible creature waiting deeper down. Meet the giant tube worm. To find them, you must travel to hydrothermal vents where underwater volcanoes blast scalding toxic water into pitch-black seas. There are no fish here, no bobbit worms, and certainly no earthworms. But towering 8-foot tubes of living tissue thrive in this hostile world, clustered like forests of pale alien chimneys. These worms should not exist by any normal definition of life. They have no eyes, no mouth, no stomach, no exit. They are biological dead ends, living loops with no obvious way to feed or function. Yet they survive by outsourcing the entire concept of eating. Inside their bodies lies an organ called the trophosome, filled with billions of symbiotic bacteria. With no sunlight available, these bacteria rely on hydrogen sulfide spewing from the vents, a chemical deadly to almost every other animal. The worms deliver the poison and the bacteria convert it into sugars that keep both alive. The worms are essentially farms growing food inside themselves using volcanic toxins as fuel. And because they never spend energy hunting or digesting, they grow faster than any known marine invertebrate, up to 3 feet per year. Despite their enormous size, they are harmless. They cannot bite, cannot flee, cannot even comprehend danger. Their brains are simplified to near oblivion. The ocean has stripped away every function except the bare minimum needed to act as living scaffolds for bacteria. They cannot move from their tubes, cannot sense predators, cannot choose anything. Their existence is simply open plume, close plume, and continue hosting life within. It is strange, tragic, and oddly poetic. The ocean turned them into hollow frameworks kept alive by organisms far smaller and far more aware. If tube worms seem surreal, the ocean keeps pushing the definition of a worm even further. Some worms evolve to fill the same ecological niche as earthworms, creatures that feed on the dead. But in the deep sea, this role becomes far more gruesome. When a whale dies and sinks, a chaotic community of scavengers strips away the flesh. Only when the skeleton remains do the zombie worms arrive. These worms, called Osedax, do not eat meat. They target the bones themselves. Like tube worms, zombie worms have no mouths and no stomachs. Instead, they grow thick green root-like structures that burrow directly into the solid bone. These roots release acid, dissolving the hard calcium so that symbiotic bacteria can consume the trapped fats and oils inside. The worms then absorb the nutrients produced by their bacterial partners, literally drinking a whale's skeleton from the inside out. Their lifestyle becomes even stranger when you look at their reproduction. At whale falls, scientists could only find female worms. For years, male worms seemed non-existent, until researchers finally looked inside the females. Male Osedax never mature. They remain tiny larval dwarfs that live permanently within the female's tube, sometimes 50 or 100 at a time. They do not eat, do not leave, and their only purpose is to fertilize eggs before dying. It is one of the most bizarre life cycles anywhere on Earth, making the ferocity of bobbit worms look almost ordinary. Zombie worms are only a few inches tall, but their strategy is extreme. Their larvae drift endlessly through the ocean currents, waiting for a whale carcass to appear. More than 99,000 out of 100,000 will never find one. They drift, starve, and die in the dark. but the rare larvae that land on a bone will spend their existence in eternal night feeding on a resource no landworm could ever reach. This drifting lifestyle is only possible in water. Worm larvae on land could never ride currents the way Osedax do. The ocean gives them mobility and opportunity even if it means near certain death for almost all of them. For all their terror, ocean worms highlight something simple and profound. Life in the sea and life on land demand entirely different strategies. Earthworms remain modest decomposers. They eat decaying leaves, aerate soil, and survive through numbers rather than force. Nothing on land resembles the chaotic, nutrient-poor battleground of coral reefs or the volcanic wastelands of hydrothermal vents. Land offers stability, predictable resources, and far fewer creatures equipped with armor claws or venom. Under these gentle conditions, earthworms never needed Jaws toxins or monstrous size. Evolution rewarded subtlety, not violence. But in the ocean, resources come with teeth. Competition is relentless. Survival favors extremes. A bobbit worm must be a weapon. A fireworm has to burn. A ribbon worm stretches beyond reason to breathe. A tube worm becomes a living farm. A zombie worm dissolves bones in the dark. The ocean turns worms into nightmares because the ocean itself is unforgiving. And the weightlessness of water frees worms from the gravitational limits that keep their land cousins small and soft. Where earthworms wriggle through soil in peace, marine worms navigate a world that forces them to evolve into hunters, toxins, giants, or living scaffolds. Fortunately for us, we live on land. Our worms may be slimy, but they are nothing compared to what waits beneath the waves. Fortunately, the horrors of ocean worms stay in their world, not ours. Earthworms may be a little unpleasant to touch, but they are peaceful recyclers far removed from the ambush predators, toxic bristles, acidic webs, and bone-dissolving strategies that shape their marine relatives. And yet these creatures reveal something extraordinary about evolution. The environment sculpts life. Gravity restricts one worm while buoyancy unleashes another. Nutrient-rich soil makes one species gentle while nutrient-poor reefs force another to become a hunter. Volcanic poison becomes fuel for one worm's survival, while deep-sea skeletons feed another through partnerships with bacteria. If you look closely, every worm tells a story of its world. Earthworms tell the story of calm landscapes filled with decaying leaves. Marine worms tell the story of brutal ecosystems where survival requires reinvention. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the journey. Let me know what creature you want to explore next. If you are curious about the oldest vertebrate predator, a creature far more dangerous than any worm, you can watch that video next.